Could I have a motion to go back into public?
Motion to go back to public.
Good evening. Welcome to a meeting of the Board of Education of Somerset Hills. Please be advised that this and all meetings of the board are open to the public and media consistent with the Open Public Meetings Act, and that advance notice required therein has been provided. This is a meeting of the Board of Education of Somerset Hills at which formal action may be taken. The public will have an opportunity to be heard as shown on the agenda.
Ms. Cooper? Here. Mr. DiGiacchino?
Here.
Mr. Mayo?
Here.
Mr. McDonald?
Here.
Mrs. Santoro? Here. Mrs. Tover? Here. Ms. Virtue? Here. Ms. Birch?
Here.
Mrs. Lees?
Please join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do not have any correspondence this evening.
Can I just make a request to speak in microphones, please? Like up close to the microphone. Thank you. Up close.
I don't think it was on.
How's that?
Thank you.
Better?
I can hear him.
You can hear?
I can hear him.
Okay. Report of the superintendent.
Well, I'm going to give an update in a bit on our strategic planning process, at least update number one. There's a second one to follow in December. But first, I want to welcome our friend John Tober up to the podium to give us a report on happenings at the middle school. Nice to see you, John.
Thank you. Good evening, I'm John Tober. I am the Student Council President for Burnsville Middle School. We have many exciting events coming up at BMS. First, Attitude of Gratitude Week is now until Thanksgiving. Peer Leadership is sponsoring gratitude activities for this week. Rutgers is our house winner for November, taking over the winter flag from Duke. Rutgers will fly for the month as a celebration of the team's hard work. Sixth grade will be having their Winter Wonderland event this month. This is co-sponsored by the BMS Student Council and the BMS HSA. The BMS Student Council has representatives for all grade levels. We urge students to get involved in student leadership. Representatives attend after-school student council meetings and they report back to the grade level. This helps to spread news about upcoming events and ideas for future events. And we're having our annual 7th and 8th grade play the first weekend in December. This year's play is Shrek Jr. We look forward to another successful year and to watch our great cast perform. The BMS Music Department is hosting the winter concerts for both chorus and band in the next few weeks. We look forward to hearing our talented singers and musicians. Finally, the New Jersey Association of Student Councils theme this year is #LevelUp. The association also picks a charity to donate to each year. The state raises thousands of dollars as a collective organization. This year's chosen charity is the Emmanuel Cancer Foundation, which raises money for pediatric cancer. And we'll begin selling shirts that say BMS #LevelUp by the end of the month, and all the proceeds will go to the Emmanuel Cancer Foundation. The shirts can be worn to our Red Out Staff and Student event in January. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, John.
I have one question for you.
Yes.
What house are you?
I am Princeton.
Princeton. Okay. I wasn't sure if you were too.
Example of that. Example, you have to set activities.
So it's a school-wide event, and that's a peer leadership is running it.
And what do they do? What kind of?
Can I jump in a little, John?
Yes.
I can tell you, Greg, from my time at the middle school, that during Attitude of Gratitude Week, students are encouraged by guidance to write letters to adults and peers that have been influential or who they are thankful for. certainly I have a couple that I saved because, you get a letter from an old student and they talk about the ways that they remember you fondly, and that's always a lovely thing to have. So it is not limited to that. Certainly there are announcements about gratitude. There are lots of opportunities and messaging around the ways that gratitude is sort of good for us from a mental health standpoint as well.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John. Now, unfortunately, I'm looking around this room and I don't see our high school reporter, so I asked our board president to take her place.
Well, I a few things that I know have gone on. The big news this week was that the boys soccer team won states, I think for the 5th time. So Mr. Laspada did it again with a new group, and I'm sure that they beat Delran 2-0, I know, on Sunday. And I think in cross country, both the girls and the boys won their section. They went to groups. The girls did not go any further than that, but the boys placed second, and they go on to the Meet of Champions in Homedale on Saturday. I also know that the school play is coming up this weekend, right? It's a musical. I think it's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
It's not a musical.
Drama.
It's not a musical.
It's a mystery.
Okay, not a
It's a
musical.
mystery.
Sorry. And that is about the extent of my student roundup, which is very brief, but I
You did a
I
great
just
job.
found
And
out.
holiday concerts are coming up. So.
Okay.
There you go. All right, I'm going to just take a minute to go over there. If the board wants to have a seat that might help them see this better, that will be fine too. I promise I will not take too long. Good evening, everybody. You may remember that last November I was here similarly updating people on the status of the strategic plan. This year I'm going to do it a little bit differently in that I'm just going to try to focus on certain aspects of it this evening and then move on to other parts of it in December. I think a different lens might help us. A little bit review of the timeline. We had a strategic plan in the district back from 2008 to 2013, and there was a sense in March of 2017 that had long expired, and it was time to sort of renew our commitment to establishing a vision. In April and May of 2017, 3 public meetings were held. They were organized through New Jersey school boards. And once areas of focus were established, the administrative team worked to kind of put action plans around those. The so far reports have been made in November of 17, 18, and now today. One of the things that came out of that work was a new mission statement. Jamie and I were actually talking about this the other day because I know one of the goals was to have something that was pithy and easy to remember, and I always laugh because I'm like, I've written it 1,000 times and I still can't remember it without looking at it. But I do want to focus on that word balanced today. That is something that I've spoken to staff about at our welcome back. I know I've spoken publicly about it as well. It is one piece of this mission statement that resonates with me the longer I read it, this aspect of balanced learning. The goals that were identified in this work span these 5 different arenas, and certainly there is overlap among them. What I can show you, and I certainly am not going to read slides this evening, but you can see that there were detailed pieces of all of these that we tried to sort of focus on. So tonight I really want to talk to you about what we've done in the arenas of health and wellness and what we've done in the area of security and physical spaces. The reason I sort of focused on putting these together is because I do feel that they kind of go together. I mentioned the mission statement speaking to balanced experiences, And I do think there are some districts that may focus their attention more on one arena than another. I am thankful for the fact that we had visionaries that sort of looked at this and said, we recognize that both of these things are important. One of the things that I know the educators in the room will look at and say, oh, we know this. Every education class it seems that you're in speaks to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It is the notion that before you are actually available to learn, there are certain needs that every human being has. And if you look starting at the bottom, you can see that you're starting with basic needs. Are you coming to school well fed and well rested? And I do think that that next tier up, when we're talking about safety, points out that emotional safety and physical safety are interrelated. So I thought that was important to kind of frame as my lens this evening. So if we talk about security, certainly there are many steps that we have taken in the last few years to address the kind of physical aspect of our safety. We have added 2 SLEO 3 positions, 1 at each campus. We have increased the security cameras that we have around the district. We have, at the request of the Burnsville Police Department, labeled all of the doors and windows to help our first responders. There's been a lock standardization project district-wide that's gone on across a couple of years. We engaged in some work last summer around mapping for first responders, which was presented to us by the county prosecutor. It enables anybody who's coming to one of our buildings in an emergency situation to have access to 3-dimensional maps on their smartphones with the capabilities of tracking where different people are. We have also recently improved our entryways, so you will now, if you come to the building during the day, have to go through not 1 but 2 locked doors to get in. Last year we engaged in kind of phase 1 of our reunification planning with the Burnsville Police Department. The district does now have a reunification plan, and our goals for this year are to work with the police department in some tabletop exercises, sitting together, working through scenarios, and also try to run some type of exercise around reunification. I think most people are aware of the fact that reunification covers the reuniting of families. If you ever had a tragedy and you had to move students from one physical location to another, what does that reunification look like? It is a complicated process and certainly lots of moving parts. Somerset County schools are working together to do some of this work. When you get into things like transportation and busing people from one place to another, where do they go? Really all aspects of a community could be involved. We're focusing on that reuniting process of parents, security, children, and we, like anything, the plan looks good when it's on paper, but we're conscious of the fact that we won't know how tight it is until we actually try to run through it. So that is where we stand in that for this year. In terms of our physical spaces, I think that we have looked to give kids and staff places to relax, to move around, to have some privacy in situations where there may be an emotional component. And certainly we recognize that physical environments color day-to-day experiences. So here at the high school, the courtyard has been opened for student use. The guidance offices have been modified slightly in terms of just offering a little bit more privacy. We know we have the classroom in the high school that received funding and has that flexible seating that everybody so covets. At the middle school, the guidance offices were moved to another area of the building to sort of give them some more privacy, move them away from the main office. The recess area is the most recent improvement in terms of a physical space there. I did include the generator as well. It should be going online soon because I do think when you talk about security and safety and planning, having a generator as a backup is certainly gives you a level of comfort that you would not have otherwise. At Bedwell, there is a wellness room that houses lots of different sensory devices that classes can go visit, and many teachers have really adopted flexible seating in their classrooms more than they had historically. One of the things I wanted to point out too is there is a personnel aspect to this work. Over the last 3 years, the Director of Guidance position was reestablished at the high school. We recently restructured the administrative team to prioritize student services. The Assistant Superintendent is now heading up that area. We have added an additional psychologist to the high school staff, and we have increased the psychologist's presence at the middle school to be a full-time position. Under health and wellness, we had 3 different bullets. One involved drug and alcohol prevention and education. Certainly, as Colleen and I were talking today about coming up with the lists of things that have been done, I'm really going to only kind of glaze over some of them. We certainly know from a board perspective that the board adopted the random drug testing policy, and that is being enacted here. Breathalyzer policies were put in place as well, and students are now go through that process at proms, at football games. Those, from all indications, are having a very positive effect on the culture and climate. In terms of programming, the Municipal Alliance funded a showing of a movie that speaks to the dangers of party culture, If They Had Known, that was screened for both students and parents, with first responders speaking after the movie. High Focus has come in and done presentations at the middle school on marijuana, on vaping. Our Student Assistance Coordinator has arranged assemblies and parent presentations with an addict who was in recovery at both the high school and the middle school. She also had a representative from CVS come in and talk to students about prescription drug addiction, and alcohol and drug awareness were infused into the peer leadership program. I certainly can't do justice to the HSA's efforts, but I can certainly speak to the fact that they have partnered with Community in Crisis and had that organization at many back-to-school nights and at their HSA meetings as well. From a curriculum standpoint, I have a little bit of a laundry list. I'm going to do my best to just walk through this. Last summer, our PE and health curriculum was updated to include signs of suicide and also tick-borne disease prevention. Digital citizenship has been included in K-8 health curriculum, and a 6th grade related arts class at the middle school was launched. In the area of wellness curriculum, we now have a 5th grade year-long research-based experience for all students. And we've developed the transitional program to the middle school experience so that kids who are moving from 4th grade to 5th grade have a day-long opportunity to really explore. A 7th grade wellness class is also in their program of studies and is offered. The middle school, as you will remember, is working with the Culture and Climate Initiative. This is their 2nd year of that work. I know that the principal and Colleen Butler spoke to us last spring about year 1. Some of what John Tober talked about in terms of this house system came out of that work. The school does participate in the Middle School Kindness Challenge. He talked about the Attitude of Gratitude Week as well. Bedwell has a wellness committee which promotes mental and physical health for students and staff. The high school has a similar committee called the Stress Less Committee, and they have planned Stress Less, Laugh More activities. The Student Assistance Coordinator has supported these efforts through initiatives like a student wellness fair, which included representatives from many community health and wellness agencies. At the high school and middle school, a grading floor has also been established to promote an outcome-based assessment paradigm. There have been no homework weekends at the high school and middle school to ensure that students have opportunities for relaxation and fun. And as Scott discussed last month, we plan to change the high school schedule to implement a rotate and drop, which will lessen students' homework load, provide increased opportunities for meaningful learning, and minimize disruptions in the same class every day. The unit lunch certainly also has benefits for health and wellness. When we look to guidance and HSA, the work that has been done, there have been mindfulness-based stress reduction for counselors and peer leaders. The grant funding has procured the Headspace app for all teachers in the district. The HSA has funded Dr. Michael Bradley's presentation on crazy stress. Christina Todaro presented on mindfulness and technology. Lisa Drew presented a 15-minute child break. The SAC and Marcy Craver have hosted parent book clubs, and a representative from Summit Behavioral Health has presented current drug trends to all counselors in the district. I'm almost done. Additional resources would include the Municipal Alliance grant. They purchased some Hoberman spheres for the classrooms at Bedwell. Zufall came in and ran multiple sessions with students in the high school surrounding empowerment and healthy dating relationships. Did you say, Colleen, that was at just the high school, right? Oh, okay. And a local cancer support group works with high school students that are affected by cancer. In terms of our staff's professional development, last year we had affirmative action training for all staff. Representatives were sent out for training in seeking educational equity and diversity that is being turnkeyed. We've had signs of suicide training. We've had mindfulness training for counseling staff and peer leaders. And last spring, all of the administrators and counselors had HIV training as well. So I think from a standpoint of not quite 3 years, it certainly seems like there's been a lot going on in this arena. We will certainly continue our commitment to the work that I've spoken about in terms of wellness. We're currently working with other high schools in the county to talk about ideas surrounding later start times for our high school students. In the arena of physical safety, we're grateful for our partnership with local law enforcement. District administrators and police will be attending an annual common professional experience next month surrounding school security. We are also working on the tabletop exercises I mentioned previously to enact our next steps in our reunification plan. There is one final thing I want to mention before I sit down. It does involve safety, and it involves our high school students. I want to take this opportunity to remind BHS students that we do not currently have a safe path for them to travel to the Burnsville Center. As most of you know, students have been walking to the center on the driveway behind TD Bank, and the gate across this driveway is locked. Climbing under or over the gate is not safe. This board has certainly been tireless in its efforts to afford students with a direct, safe route to the center, and I applaud all of you for your work. Unfortunately, so far, these efforts have been unsuccessful. So I certainly encourage parents and students to support Dr. Nigel's directives and travel safely on sidewalks if they want to go to town. I have spoken to the board recently about my concerns about that locked gate in terms of more than just trespassing. Certainly, I am someone who spends time worrying about the national news and school tragedies, and when I see locked gates that could impede egress, I certainly hate to think about what that could look like if we were ever in an emergent situation. I've shared my concerns with contacts at Weichert and TD Bank and Chief Valentine, and I remain hopeful that the board's continued outreach to these community stakeholders will find us with a safer alternative than our current setup. Anybody have any questions? All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think when you see all that on paper, it sure looks like a lot.
Less than
And that's
3 years,
only,
right?
I mean,
Yeah,
I
it's
know, you know, you see little bits here and little bits there, but when you look at it all, it's a lot of progress in that specific area, and I look forward to seeing the rest of the.
One of the things I did not mention is that we're going to work again in the spring to renew the strategic plan with New Jersey school boards. I know that's something we talked about recently, and I feel as though it's always important for us to have that kind of roadmap, so I'm looking forward to that one.
Thank you. Public questions and comments for actionable agenda items. We very much welcome input from the public. Public comments are welcome at this time on any agenda item. Towards the end of the meeting, there is a second public forum on any topic. Please state your name and address. Comments are limited to 3 minutes, but an individual may speak a second time after all others who wish to speak on the topic have been heard. Please understand that our public forums are not structured as question and answer sessions, but are offered as opportunities to share your thoughts with the board. In instances where the board feels that there is a misunderstanding or inaccuracy, the board president or superintendent may address the comment. In accordance with New Jersey statute, the board will not discuss matters regarding specific personnel. Public questions and comments will be limited to 30 minutes. Thank you for your input. Everybody can have 6 minutes. Are there any public comments on any agenda items? Seeing none, we need a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve. Second.
Any discussion? All right, roll call. Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. DeGiacchino?
Yes.
Mr. Mayo?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro?
Yes.
Mrs. Tober?
Yes.
Ms. Virtue?
Yes.
Ms. Birch?
Yes.
Mrs. Lees?
Yes. Okay, so Bob Baker's on here for a family wedding, so we will hear from Jan now on the finance, facilities, and operations report.
Thank you. The Finance, Facilities, and Operations Committee met Wednesday, November 13th for about 3 hours. All the committee members were in attendance. We discussed 10 issues, all of which are still ongoing. Those 10 issues are long-range facility plan and capital projects for 2021, the YMCA contract for the 2020 summer camp, Bedwell Garden stipend, letter from TD Bank regarding trespassing, home instruction, financial audit results and recommendations, GPS on school buses, funding of field trips, compliance with Title IX for athletics, and the 2021 budget calendar. On the letter from TD Bank, Dr. Dempsey has already spoken about it, but we received a letter from the bank saying that the students were trespassing on the property and the gate needed to be kept locked. The gate is now locked, and Dr. Dempsey is working to try and see if she can come to a better resolution with both TD Bank, Weichert, and the shopping center. For the long-range facility plan, it's still being updated, but we reviewed 2 critical projects for 2021. These are the backup generator for Bedwell and the replacement of a rooftop heating and cooling unit above the middle school gym. The committee felt that we needed more information on both projects before we move them into the capital improvement budget for next year. And Heather will obtain requested information and we will discuss it in December if needed. We received some of the requested information from Somerset Hills YMCA for their 2020 summer camp to be held at the high school. About 140 students attended the camp every 2 weeks for the 8-week period at the high school. Of the 635 campers participating in the high school camp and at the camp at the YMCA facility, Only 35% of those children are from the Somerset Hills School District. The brochure for last year shows that the average cost for 2 weeks is $585. For the last 3 years, they have used our facilities at the same rate of $42,000 per year. Based on our policy for nonprofit use and with the specific facilities the YMCA uses, we should be charging them $109,250. At this point, the committee felt that a meeting with Kim DeZuter, Senior Director of Family Services at the YMCA, is an appropriate step in negotiating fees for the next 3 years, and this will be on a December agenda. Dr. Dempsey discussed the need for a bedwell garden stipend to ensure that existing garden is managed properly throughout the year. The committee felt that a stipend was appropriate as long as it was below a 10-month bedwell stipend of $2,750 and the duties were formalized. Dr. Dempsey will take the request to the curriculum committee for further discussion. Dr. Dempsey reviewed how we run home instruction program for students, the costs associated with it, and the difficulty in finding instructors. The current rate for instruction is $59.11 per hour per the SHAE contract. This rate is higher than all the surrounding school districts. Dr. Dempsey plans to have a meeting with SHAE to work on the issue. We had the financial auditors come in and talk about their findings for the 2018-2019 year. They are making one recommendation regarding the payroll agency account. They want better detail in the monthly balance reports. Heather will develop an action plan to resolve. The plan will review next month and board approved at the January 2020 meeting. They also reviewed 10 other operational findings that do not require formal recommendations. Most of these have already been addressed, while a few others remain to be resolved. The administration is still reviewing options for the GPS app to be used in our school buses. The vendor has not yet provided all the answers to their questions, and they'll report back next month. We discussed how field trips are funded. Some are funded by student activities fees, some are funded by individual fees paid by students, some are funded by fundraising, and some other ways, and it's not very clear. We talked about how to have a uniform method of funding trips. Before we change the current policy, the committee would like to know the total amount spent on all field trips during a year divided into 2 categories, educational and co-curricular. We discussed that the district is following Title IX rules regarding varsity sports offered at the high school. There was disagreement on how various sports are categorized as boys and girls, since many boys' sports now allow girls to participate. We will have our attorneys research the current law and give their opinion as to whether our current mix of offerings is in compliance with Title IX. And the December 2021 budget calendar was distributed. We'll discuss first steps at the next meeting. That's it. So I will move that we vote on items 1 through 8 on the agenda for finance.
Second.
Any discussion?
I have a question about the garden. When you say the committee felt that a stipend was appropriate as long as it was below other bedwell stipends of $2,750, what is that? Just elaborate on that.
Why
Yeah.
that?
Mhm.
Because it's for a much shorter period of time. The other stipends were a full 10 months, and this is, the garden's only maintained for a short period of time.
Is there any way we can maybe revisit this and discuss it, because we may be able to enhance and grow this position?
Is that a pun, Janice? Grow.
Yeah.
I think the recommendation of the committee was to have it go back to curriculum, and certainly when curriculum discusses that, if there's other information that they want to share with finance, we can do that.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Any other questions?
Roll call. Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. DeGiacchino?
Yes.
Mr. Mayo?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro?
Yes.
Mrs. Tober?
Yes.
Ms. Virtue?
Yes.
Ms. Birch?
Yes.
Mrs. Lees?
Yes.
I move that we vote on items 1 through 2 on the agenda and item 3 on the addendum for facilities.
Second.
Any discussion?
All right, roll call. Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. DiGiacchino?
Yes.
Mr. Mail?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro?
Yes.
Mrs. Tober?
Yes.
Ms. Virtue?
Yes.
Ms. Birch?
Yes.
Mrs. Least?
Yes.
Okay, curriculum. Okay. The curriculum committee met on November 12th, and the first person that discussed, presented anything was Susan Fisher. She proposed 2 new one-semester elective courses, both in the art field. In the first course, Introduction to 3D, Sculpture, and Ceramics, students will learn the elements and principles of three-dimensional art and design. They will discover the connections between sculpture and other art disciplines as they relate specifically to three-dimensional art. Students will gain knowledge in additive, subtractive, and assemblage techniques as sources of construction. The sculpture portion of this course will offer students the opportunity to make art in the round and think through a multitude of materials in 3 dimensions. The ceramic portion will investigate hand-built objects as well as their decoration and firing. This course is taught in both clay ceramics and mixed media. The end result of these pursuits may be purely aesthetic, but may also have functional and utilitarian aspects. Other similar and neighboring districts already offer this course. The costs involved are curriculum writing, about $1,000, 5 days, $200 per day. Materials, $2,000. Total is $3,000, and approximately $1,500 is a one-time cost. $1,500 is a yearly cost for materials. The second proposed art course, Global Artisans, will offer students an introduction to three-dimensional art making and include a unit on entrepreneurship. The goal of this course is to enable students to learn the concepts and skills needed to produce decorative and utilitarian objects with aesthetic and technical proficiency. As potential artisans, students will also investigate entrepreneurship opportunities. Students may research successful artisans from around the world as they learn about the possibilities for selling their artwork as a hobby or potential career. Cost will involve curriculum writing, $1,000, 5 days, $200 per day. Materials, $1,000, total $2,000. Approximately $1,000 is a one-time cost. $1,000 is a yearly cost for materials. So keep in mind that our art course offerings have not changed in recent years, and one of our goals in our district strategic plan is to develop and promote K-12 art.
To be included in update number 2 in December.
And we have 2 new art teachers, one at the high school and one at the middle school.
Therefore, the curriculum committee enthusiastically recommends the implementation of these 2 art courses. After that, Michael Catelli proposed an advanced ESL English course for 9th through 12th graders. We currently offer 2 levels of ESL English, beginner and intermediate. When ESL students show proficiency in intermediate English, they move directly into a mainstream English course with some ESL support classes. Currently, ESL courses are focused on grammatical conventions of reading, writing, speaking, and listening, whereas mainstream English language courses tend to focus on literature analysis. The transition between the 2 has been difficult for students exiting the ESL program. This new course will allow for more flexibility and placement for our ESL students. The course would not be aligned with a specific grade level, but rather a skill level. A section of advanced ESL English would likely replace one of the 2 sections of intermediate ESL English we currently have. We are not creating a new teaching period, but we are targeting instruction to support our students with the teaching periods we currently have. Cost would be curriculum work at the going rate for a new course and $2,000 for new readers. The curriculum committee also recommends this course proposal. Items still under consideration and discussion are calendar proposed for 2020-21, because I made a mistake in my notes to you all. Calendars will go to all committees and HSAs for discussion and feedback due to possible changes. We, like other communities, are looking into an earlier start day. We had a discussion of our current language offerings in the district. A small number of students are interested in various languages other than those that are currently offered, such as Mandarin, ASL, German, etc. As an alternative, students can pursue these languages through virtual school. SLE timeline. As noted, we are looking into implementing structured learning experiences for our STAR students. If the program is to be extended to Gen Ed students, there would be budgetary, logistical, and staff concerns. There needs to be a proposal and action plan. We will do that. All field trips were approved. We reviewed the Bernards High School profile, and the committee continues to analyze AP scores. So, I would like to move items 1 through 5 on the agenda and items 2 through 4 on the addendum. Are there any questions, discussions? I actually have something, I'll let you go first.
I was just curious, Janice, with the art classes.
Yeah.
Will there be any additional staffing requirements for that, or will you be able to execute those courses with the
No.
staff?
No additional
they
staff, right.
And I was surprised to find out we had a calendar at the high school and one at the middle school, which nobody's been using. But our high school art teacher is actually a potter. So it's nice to take advantage of that, yeah.
Well, I do have a few things that I wanted to add to this discussion that I didn't bring up while we discussed it in curriculum. And I actually spoke to Jan, who's an art aficionado. But I just wanted to mention, I started thinking about art courses and the value of them, right? And, in addition to releasing creativity in all of us, art programs have the potential to improve students' memory and concentration skills, develop decision-making and critical thinking skills, enhance communication and listening skills. It also helps learners to develop creative problem-solving skills and also encourages focus and discipline. It promotes self-directed learning. Studies have also shown that the level of dopamine in your brain increases, and that wards off depression and sadness. It can also boost your self-esteem. So, I had a little bit of a conversation because I really started to think about this, that really, what is the value? And there is value in our art, music courses, etc. And so I'm going to just ask Jan to explain some things that we talked about earlier, if you would.
I don't know if I'm an aficionado, but I'm certainly a collector, and my wife has been on the board for many years of the Center for Contemporary Art in Bedminster, and we're big supporters of art and creativity. So I think it allows people to explore things that are not just rote learning, to push the boundaries on what they're comfortable with. So if you take a ceramics class, you're going to start not knowing what you're capable of, and you're going to push yourself. And if you look at artists, they're always pushing themselves ahead, and they're doing it in a new and unusual and creative ways, and you can bring that to lots of other things. And I'm a very science, math-oriented person, very structured in business. But every morning when I wake up, I look around our house, we have hundreds of pieces of art, and I can appreciate everything I see, and like the beauty in it, and the creativity in it, and it changes my whole way of looking at the world when I walk out of the house. And so I think it's really important for kids to have that experience. I have two kids who graduated from the school. One's in film and television because of the courses they took here in video. And the other one's a writer because of taking writing and journalism classes here, both of which I consider to be arts. So I think it's really important.
And you know, I was thinking of what children go through these days and the stress level and their reliance on outside opinions through social media, etc. And I think art can be something where they can produce individually and feel good about because they did it, and it really doesn't matter what you or anybody else thinks of it. And I do think that's important. And I think there are other connections, like we were talking about glazes and how, you know, you can mix glazes and make colors. That's based on science. You put it in the kiln, it comes out a different color. You know, and we also talked about doctors and dentists and how they take x-rays, and you have to look at that visually, that three-dimensional product, and understand. And didn't you mention about operating too?
Well, so for example, when you're doing ceramics and you're taking something and turning it into a three-dimensional object, you have to learn to think three-dimensionally because you're visualizing before you do it. And doctors, dentists, people who work on things from seeing two-dimensional images have to be able to take that two-dimensional image and put it into their mind in a three-dimensional way. So it's just a training for something that they may have later in life. And there are lots of things that you learn from art that you'll use later in life that have nothing to do with what you consider to be art. I also want to mention that I think we have a very vibrant art community in New Jersey. There's the Center for Contemporary Arts, which has an outreach program. I think we should try and work with the groups that already exist. I, for example, know lots of ceramic artists who are working artists who earn their living through doing art. And I think it would be a great experience if we have these classes that they actually go and spend time with some of those people so they can see what it's like if people want to think about a career in art. They can see how hard it actually is to be a successful artist.
I see a field trip.
I think that's a good field
And
trip.
I think Mrs. Fisher mentioned that our high school art teacher has really been making a lot of connections in the local community.
She
and
has started there was a field trip that I think we approved last month maybe, for the AP art students to go to something in Princeton. Yeah.
Right, I mean, there are museums, but then there's also, if you want to learn about, you know, because one of these things is about entrepreneurship and art, go and meet with real artists.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm happy to
Yeah.
provide.
And I think they mentioned that, I kind of think that's what
Yes,
Mrs.
the grounds
Fisher
floor.
I loved
loved
it.
Yeah.
It's a great place.
They went to that last year, the
Yes,
dancers
yes.
culture, that was a great field trip.
I think in curriculum, it was such an exciting discussion that we had with regards to these classes. You know, I'll speak first of the art class, but and what's been kind of going on in the high school program and growing in that in the middle school. And so, you know, I think the whole committee felt like this was such a great direction to go in, and so excited to support it and to continue to at the middle. You know, we talked about the kiln and where that can go in the future. So, yeah, it was really exciting.
Trickle down to the
Not,
To the other schools, yeah.
not everybody who graduates from school will have a career in science, technology, engineering, and math. Some people will have other careers.
Yeah, and also
So, we
Monica brought
need
up
to
the
support
point in
Yeah.
curriculum, how, you know, there's a lot of talk about is it STEM, is it STEAM, but really, and Monica, you'll do a better job explaining this, but how that, you know, art is just embedded in the science, technology, yeah, and, you know.
And that's one of the first courses a lot of engineers take, or technologists, they take a design course to design. So art is a really big part of that. I mean, you want to make sure if you're gonna, this is what I said, if you're doing any type of technology or engineering and you're gonna sell it, it has to look nice. And that's one of the big things at Apple. You know, you think about the same companies that release the same thing. Apple had this beautiful product, and we understood how to use it. So that's something that's great about art. So art's important for us.
Right,
Yeah.
we can have structurally sound buildings, or we can have structurally sound and beautiful buildings. We want people that bring to the table that thought of creating things that are beautiful, that actually create emotions in people, because it's not only logic, you also have to have emotion in decision.
Yeah, and you know, in connection with that, I also think about art. You know, when you look at a piece of art, a painting or sculpture, whatever it is, everybody sees something different in it, right? And I truly think that that kind of thing relates to people and what we all see in each other. And we could see different things in each other. And to me, that's very important. I just, I wanted to have this little bit of discussion because we tend to like, oh, we're going to do this course or whatever. But I really started thinking about the art courses and how valuable they are. So there we are.
That's exciting. It's exciting.
And I think they have to give credit to the teacher who came up with the design.
Yes.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
she's thinking about changing the art in I think
And I
that's
think the board saw evidence of all she had done last year in her first year. Certainly, one of the reasons that she was such an appealing candidate to Scott was that she really came to the interview process with such a vision for what she wanted to build and grow. So I think we're just the lucky recipients of that.
And then I just also, I think that the ESL class too was such a great discussion and, gave us such a good perspective of how our ESL students, it is a difficult transition from, placing out of that test into sometimes a grade level course. And so I think it's great that we recognize that transition, obviously, and then are really meeting the needs of those students to really help them further their education and then be able to work with the literature in the classes. So that was also, I think, was such a positive.
We all need to get a lot out of Beowulf.
Yeah, right, and some of the books that they have, I mean, that was eye-opening, right?
But I think the nice
So-
thing about that is that just talking to Michael is that they had so many other things they were doing
Yes.
that we're not aware of. And
Yeah.
I think at some point he was going to bring all that to talk to
Yes,
everybody
he
about.
is.
But they're doing a lot
Yeah.
of things for that, for ESL. So I think that's great too.
Well,
Absolutely.
also, it's difficult. I don't speak another language, but if you do, or if you're learning another language, I think most of us don't realize how very difficult that is, because it's not just learning word for word what the words are. It really is about ideas and expression, and it's about so much. And yes, you could learn the words, but what about all the other ideas that go along with it and the explanation of your ideas? It's very complex. So I think this will be a good course.
Ready for roll call? All right. Ms. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. DiGiacchino,
Yes.
Mr. Nail,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro,
Yes.
Mrs. Tober,
Yes.
Ms. Virtue,
Yes.
Ms. Birch,
Yes.
Mrs. Lees.
Yes. Okay, personnel and policy.
Okay. So we met on November 12th for about an hour and a half, and all of our members were in attendance. I'll just start with personnel. Yeah, personnel is, I just want to go in order of the agenda here, so, yeah, okay, so we'll start with personnel. So in personnel, we discussed the job descriptions for the central office confidential support, and we reviewed those with Dr. Dempsey, and we discussed the changes she was making to those and the realigning of the responsibilities based upon the new part-time role. So we're comfortable with recommending those. And Dr. Dempsey gave us an update on our ACES program at Bedwell and the movement of some of our ACES students to BMS at the end of this year, and the staffing that will be required to accommodate this transition. So we discussed that. So we're aware of, going forward in the future what some of the needs may be. And in policy,
Want to vote on that?
do you want me to make those, you want me to move that first? Okay. So for personnel, I'd like to move items 1 through 9 on the agenda and addendum items 7 and 9.
Isn't it 10, 1 to 10?
Did I miss one?
job description.
Sorry. Okay. I'd like to move items 1 through 10 on the agenda and addendum items 7 and 9.
Number 5, where we have the 2 co-curricular positions that we changed from, I didn't understand the change. So we were gonna pay them 50%, we decided to pay them full percent, or this person, so there are.
I think the person is sharing that role and the JV one, and I don't know the details, Monica, in terms of this particular, but it looks to me as though the person was appointed for the full stipend, and now it's being changed to 50% because my guess is that it's being shared with somebody else.
So does that mean that they have 3 assistants? I mean,
Are you
because,
talking in wrestling?
well, yeah, let's talk about wrestling first. That's what I was just looking at, because it was 71.25 for the full assistant.
One of the things that I know Mr. Hoppy has talked to committees about is that he sometimes has sports, you know, when kids sign up for sports, he can't always predict how many kids are going to come out. And he may move stipended monies from one position to another if he needs more coaches in one particular sport than another. What the directive that he has received historically, I believe, is that he should not necessarily be going over the budgeted stipend amounts, because those are contractually agreed upon. But for instance, if he knows that he needs an extra basketball coach for girls for freshmen, and he does not need another coach in another place, we have given him that authority to move those monies.
So the assistant position had a pot of, for that, of 71.25, and at one point we only had one person assistant, because now we have 2 that's divided it.
That is my
correct?
understanding.
Okay.
Yes.
So then we went back to fencing then, so that means that fencing has a pot of 5,400 for 2 assistants, but now they only have 1?
Yes, that is my
So they
understanding.
have the coach and the 1 assistant. Is that what is, that's what it is?
My understanding is the fencing assistant for freshmen, that Michael Rack is now getting the full stipend to that.
Okay, so, and I'm just asking that, because I know we didn't talk about this, I don't know, did we talk about how big fencing, how many students are in there, now they only have 2 people?
No, I think historically, Mike has done that movement based on need as he goes. He knows all of the stipends are contractually agreed upon with Shay, so he knows what he has in terms of who he appoints, what price point that would command, and he also knows what monies he has available from a budget perspective. I do not think historically he has necessarily gone through that with me, certainly not. I think if that's something that the board wants brought to them, we can do that. My understanding from, I think it was last spring when he came to talk to committees, was that we felt comfortable with him making that movement, because that made sense. If you didn't have enough students who showed up for a freshman sport and there was a stipend associated with it, and you had way more students show up for another sport, we wanted to empower him to move those monies.
Okay, and I was just asking that because that's, I'm more familiar with the whole fencing component.
Right.
And usually with 3 assistants, because you have 1 for each weapon, and
So just so I understand, because I'm not overly familiar with fencing.
no, I was
Is
just wondering.
Is your concern, Monica, that maybe fencing doesn't have enough supervision? Is that where you're coming from?
That's what I'm wondering about, but it could be that
Right.
there might not be that many kids, and
Yeah,
this
no.
person, because I know the person who's doing the assisting is very good, and he does this one, so I know him, and he's good,
Right.
so I just wonder if maybe that is no longer a big group.
And I could
Because I
certainly.
know at one point they had like 50 kids, or maybe they don't have
Yeah,
that
no, we
anymore.
certainly don't want children running around with weapons that we're not supervising properly.
And then sometimes they may not be able to get another person too, so I was just wondering,
Right.
that's really what it is.
Yeah,
just
I
wondering.
don't know offhand, but I can certainly
Yeah.
look into it.
Any other comments?
All right, roll call. Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. DiGiacchino?
Yes.
Mr. Mayo,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro,
Yes.
Mrs. Tover,
Yes.
Ms. Virtue,
Yes.
Ms. Birch,
Yes.
Mrs. Lees.
Yes.
Okay, so for policy, to begin with, the committee just discussed how we wanted to receive policies a little bit, if we wanted to see, sometimes we get these big Strauss estimate updates of, I don't know what Gretchen's 20 policies, so, we just, and luckily, we're not in that cycle right now.
We just got through all of
We just got through it, so it was a good time to have a discussion about how we want to receive policies, and we did agree that we'd like to see the strikeouts, just to kind of have a comparison when we're taking a look at the different versions. So we discussed that, and then we discussed policy and regulation 8600, which is the student transportation, which was in the last Strauss estimate.
It was the end of Alert 218.
Yes, of that update, and we're comfortable recommending adoption of the mandated changes, and we have put them in first reading. As a result of looking at that policy, we would like F&O to schedule some time in the future to take a look at our hazardous routes and see if they need to be updated.
Heather, one of the things you and I will have to follow up on is what the current status of that list is and how best to go about that.
Dr. Dempsey updated us on ongoing county discussions with regards to various options. In school districts, we're sending students out for drug testing if they've been caught with vapes. Some districts may be moving away from sending out every student, which is what we currently do. And at this point, the committee wants to keep the policy as it is for now, but we will continue to monitor this under the advice of our administration and as well as our attorney over the next several months, and then just update based on that. And we discussed the need to look at our early graduation policies and regulations to make sure that they align with current practices. At this point, it does not look like we will have any early graduates this year, so Dr. Dempsey is going to work with administration to consider various options for how we make sure that the practice and policy align and bring that forth to the committee. So at this point, I'd like to move items number 1 and 2 on the, on the agenda. Any discussions?
Could you explain what you were saying about the early graduation?
There's language in policy that speaks to whether students are freshmen, sophomore, juniors, seniors. And sometimes when a student decides that he or she may want to graduate early, they have met the requirements for graduation, but there's some language in some places that speaks to credit accrual, and there's some language in some places that speaks to junior. And so we got into a conversation around if somebody was technically a junior in that they were in their third year, what would that look like from a standpoint of credits accrued? It could impact, and I only say this because you like to extrapolate, potentially it could impact who was your valedictorian or salutatorian. What does that calculation look like? What is the timing of that calculation? What is the data available to calculate a GPA for somebody who is graduating early versus somebody who's not? So it's a little bit of a rabbit hole. I know it came up the year before last.
Yeah.
And I think we just want to make sure that if we have somebody who's in that position, again, we have a clear understanding among the board and administration and the student body and parents in terms of how it all works.
Okay. And I can see that because I know what you're talking about in that situation, because that is something you wonder about, because they don't need a lot really to.
Right.
Because our juniors, after they complete the junior year, all they really need is a PE and English, and they can graduate,
Yeah.
they can actually graduate, so I understand that.
Anybody else?
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. DeGiacchino?
Yes.
Mr. Mail?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro?
Yes.
Mrs. Tober?
Yes.
Ms. Virtue?
Yes.
Ms. Birch?
Yes.
Mrs. Lees?
Yes. Community Relations.
Thank you. So the Community Relations Committee met on November 14th for about an hour. The first topic that we discussed was community service. Now, this was something actually that came up, I want to say, almost a year ago.
Yeah.
As something that we wanted to look into, assess where we are, what we're doing, is it still appropriate? And at the time, we were undertaking the whole venture of the SLE program and looking into that. And what we said was we really couldn't have two big topics ongoing at the same time. So we tabled community service. And now that the SLE program has been passed over to curriculum and on its merry way, we had a discussion around community service. We talked about what we're currently doing. We had some history on what had been done in the past, such as a Martin Luther King Day of Service. And we also talked about some new ideas that the committee members had. And where we ultimately landed was Dr. Dempsey agreed that she's going to go away and have a think around this. She also committed to an active reach out to HSA members, students, and staff, so that she is able to gather everyone's thoughts and ideas and leverage those, and will come back to us with some thoughts. The second topic was a discussion around a new job fair, if you will, concept. And this was an idea that was brought by a member of the public to a member of our committee. And it's really more like a real life expo. It was something that was done in either a Texas or a Colorado district, where students were able to undergo sort of pretend type interviews. And this was a partnership with the Chamber of Commerce. So students were able to go through interviews, secure a job, and then once they had this pretend salary, if you will, they had to go through sort of a living process of securing housing, transportation, and other living expenses. And the real emphasis was to teach them about budgeting. So this idea was bantered back and forth, and I think where we landed with that was that we need to get some more information before we can do anything with that. We got an update from Dr. Dempsey on the Bernardsville Cultural Arts Committee and the public mural. And essentially where that is that the community meeting was held. The artist sort of led that session and asked community members to share their ideas regarding our town. And the fun thing about that was that the whole process is actually documented by students and is going to be going forward, correct?
Yes. There was another meeting, I believe it was on Monday. I was at a meeting of chefs, and so I missed it, but Susan Fisher represented the group, and the artist has worked through all of the ideas that were generated at the brainstorming session by the community, and has now sort of distilled it to a list, and they're trying to get to the concrete, what elements of sort of our town, Bernardsville, are going to be memorialized on the mural. So the timeline is unchanged. They hope to have the whole thing finished by the end of the school year, and they're going to, once they kind of have those ideas, she's going to be working with our art teacher at the high school and our students to actually create that. So if anybody out there wants to paint, they'll let us paint too.
We also got an update from Dr. Dempsey on the little libraries. This has taken a little bit of a different turn. Due to some scheduling conflicts and time constraints, the boxes that we thought would be able to be built at the high school, that's not actually going to be able to happen. But St. John on the Mountain, which was going to fund the building of those boxes, has actually agreed to actually just purchase the boxes. You can actually just do it online. It's pretty straightforward. So those boxes will be purchased And hopefully the footing's put in before it gets too cold and the ground frozen. And we will be stuffing it with books and hopefully be requesting book donations on an ongoing basis. And then lastly, we got an update on the SLE program from Colleen Butler, and essentially it's what Janice reported on. So.
If I could just add a little something to that. First, I want to thank the Community Relations Committee for all of the work that they've been doing to support structured learning experiences for our students. And I'd also like to give a special thank you to Amy Engelman, who happens to be here this evening. Amy has really been working tirelessly to make connections with the community on behalf of her students, and she and her students hosted our Bernardsville Chamber of Commerce. Was that just yesterday?
Yeah.
Yesterday. And it was an amazing opportunity for the community to see what great things our students are doing, and it was just an all-around feel-good, great moment. So,
I
thank
went
you, Amy.
down there for the first time. I don't know, I think if you haven't been down there, it's amazing. It's such a great space. Kids were wonderful. It was really, really great.
Teachers want
So
Yeah, and I also want to thank the community members who came, and gave generously of their time to spend time with
it's
our
wonderful.
students. It was
So
great.
if you haven't seen it, go see it.
They can even make you a latte
I had a latte
with almond milk,
and a confetti cookie. I'm confessing.
salted caramel cookies, homemade ice cream. It was wonderful.
This is great.
So thank you, Erica. Thank you. Thank you, Amy. Thank you. Anyone have any questions?
Okay, do we have any public comment on non-agenda items?
Oh, sure. I just wanted to say the conversation regarding art and the advanced ESL program is so amazing. I'm sure a lot of you know, but maybe not everyone, that Community in Crisis actually this Sunday is running a program in conjunction with Art C because of the tremendous value in stress relief and stress management in regards to art and using art, and it's a mirror image theme, and the mode of self-expression that can be given through that medium is equivalent to perhaps creative writing. It's so important for addressing the whole student, the whole child, and I just think it's phenomenal. I had the opportunity to be in the middle school the other day and got to see what is going on there with the art program, which is ridiculously exciting because it is night and day. So phenomenal. And just in regards to the advanced ESL, that's something near and dear to my heart since I taught it. And there is so much nuance, even though a student may test out, there's so much nuance in the type of scaffolding that takes place within an ESL classroom that may not take place in a mainstream classroom. And when I did my student teaching, I taught Civics 1 and 2 ESL. And it could be as simple as the way you're using prepositions in the classroom while teaching civics so that a student gets everything out of a lesson. So a class like that is extraordinary if it's able to be made available. So I just wanted to say how encouraging and amazing that was. And I also just wanted to clarify, as far as the district calendar approval that's in discussions, will that be approved in January or is it going to vote? Like, how is that?
I don't know that we have the date. I mean, that's kind of what we're aiming for.
Okay.
I certainly don't think we'll be voting for it in December because Colleen still hasn't gone to, I think it's Bedwell's HSA. They had their child assault prevention at the last meeting, so we couldn't get in there to talk about the calendar yet.
Okay.
So that is January is kind of the aiming for. Typically, it's been done in March, I think. And our intent was to move it up earlier because of the conversation around when does school start and when Labor Day falls.
Yeah, okay.
I also just wanted,
I just wanted to clarify one thing too with regards, because I may have misheard you, but I think when you were reporting on, you said an earlier start time. And I just want to clarify, because we're also talking about start date to the school.
No times are changing.
And we're definitely not making them earlier. So
that's right.
I just want that to be clear.
on that topic, I want to thank, we had several board members go down to Cherry Valley Country Club down south, I forget what town that was in. Skillman, right, last week to hear Dr. Mandelbaum speak about later start times for high school, and also the Princeton superintendent was there, and he did a presentation on, they went to this last year, and he did a presentation on how they did it and all the steps they took, and it was really interesting, and it gave us a lot of food for thought, so on how, we might proceed in the future.
I'm going to a meeting early next month with Scott and with my copy that the county is running for superintendents to come with high school principals and ADs to see if we could sort of coordinate some of our efforts in terms of timeline. So it is it's moving forward in terms of conversations. I think certainly every district has to make an independent decision on what is best for them.
The superintendent from Princeton said that he would email you this presentation.
Yeah, I haven't gotten it yet.
Okay. But it would be good to have that. There was some very valuable information about the process that we went through.
And I'm also just gonna, we got some of
You
the
got it.
coveted copies, but, right? I literally stole it, guys. I'm like, do you have your notes in there? I'll take it. This is the final report of the New Jersey School Board Association's Task Force on Mental Health Services in the Public Schools. So I have not started to read it yet, but they did show us a short video, which we can all access on the New Jersey School Boards Association page. But, it looked really interesting, and I think there's a lot of good data and information. So everybody can get this in the mail.
It's online.
And you can print it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's on, yeah, you can
Yeah.
download it.
Share a link.
I'm sure, yeah, I'll see that.
Yeah, definitely. So it's just some nice light reading.
Absolutely.
Okay, any other comments?
Yeah, I just want to take an opportunity. I mean, we had an election, and we're going to have some transition to this school board. And I think it was encouraging to see good participation from the community, although the turnout was relatively low. But as the folks around here know, it's like a lot of hours can be put in, and two people who were going to be losing from the board have made a real difference during their both short and long tenures with this board. And it's you've made a great impact, Jan, and the time that you spent has not gone unnoticed, and the amount of time that you spend sort of diligently reading materials in preparation for meetings has been impressive, and quite frankly, alarming to me at times. And I'm like, wow, I probably needed to put more work in because he's so detailed. But you really, you made a real impact in a lot of different ways, and your service did not go unnoticed, and deeply appreciated. And Greg, has been a tireless advocate on behalf of the school system and the children in the school system for many, many years. And we have been, on multiple sides on multiple issues. But what I've always known about Greg is that his heart is so deeply in it for the students of this school district, and has always led with his heart, and he's made a huge difference in a lot of different areas here for the school district, and has always fought for the safety of our children and the health and wellness of our children. And there's one particular thing that's really like a great legacy of Greg's, which is the intergenerational prom, and something that he shies away from because he's not a guy who likes to kind of bask in the limelight. But it was an area that was brought even closer to home for me recently in an essay that was written by our daughter about that topic for a college application. So the impact that you've made on this district is significant and long-lasting. And I just want to thank you for that. One vote is a crazy thing, and it's like, thankfully that's how we have a democracy, but you've made a big impact here, and you're going to be missed. Both of you are going to be missed. But I did want to share that. Oh, I didn't realize Monica lived well. Monica, I love you. What can I say? I didn't realize. Yes, well, I love you too. In so many ways. You've introduced A to STEAM, but no, I mean, it's.
Monica you have the best questions, and, we all benefit from that, and the persistent, asking and seeking more information, and it really helps me understand various aspects of being on the board that may not be in my lane. So I, certainly have learned to appreciate and will miss your questions. So come back and ask us lots of questions from the board.
Monica knows a lot of rules, which is very helpful.
Been on board a long time, so
Right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, I wasn't on there, but okay. Thinking about for this next month. We'll do that again next month.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How's that?
Yeah.
Okay. Would anyone like to motion?
Motion that we,
Motion to
adjourn.
Second. Janice, okay. Thank you very much. Good evening.